Hello, I'm Lisa. This is my good friend, Mr. Indiana Bones. And today we're going to look at naming as many of the bones on Indiana as we can. Now I'll start by answering the two most obvious questions that I do get asked about him all the time. I get asked, is he real? Well, he's real plastic. Okay, he's just plastic. But he is an exact copy of a real man's skeleton that was taken and moulded and then made into this skeleton that's used to teach doctors and nurses and all sorts of medical people all over the world. Which leads to the second question. I keep calling him he. Is he really a he? Well, yes, he is. There's a couple of ways you can tell the difference between a man's skeleton and a woman's skeleton, because our bones are one of the very few things that are different between men and women. Our brains are just the same inside. We can do anything we like, but our bones are different. Most obvious difference is this one here, our pelvis. And on men, that's smaller than it is on women, because ladies have to have enough room to be able to carry babies if they get pregnant. So a woman's pelvis is much wider. That's why we have bigger hips and bigger bums. We can't help it. At least that's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. There are a couple of other differences as well, though, some a bit more secret. If I turn him round, on the back of a man's skull, there's a little bump just there, the base of their head. Women don't have it. It's just on men. And that's one of the little clues that people like archaeologists can use if they've found a grave and looking at an old skeleton. They can look at clues like the pelvis and the shape of the head to find out if it's a man or a woman. So we're going to put all of the names of the bones on Indiana here. And I'm going to use the scientific names rather than the common ones. And I'm going to give you lots and lots of tips and tricks for how to remember some of the more complicated or tricky ones. So let's start at the top. Your skull, your cranium. Now your cranium protects your brainium. That's how I remember that one. So a bit of sellotape. Your cranium protects your brainium. And then your jawbone here, this one. And this is called the mandible. Now the way I remember that one is to think of some big hipster bloke who's got a big beard. So think of your man with a beard on the mandible. I didn't say these ways were going to be any clever, I just said they'd be useful. So, mandible. Are you going to bite that one for me? I'm going to pop that in there. There we go. Right. You did this much better in rehearsal. Right. Working our way down. Our collarbone here. Collarbone here. Correctly called your clavicle. Label for clavicle. So these ones here. These get broken very easily. If you fall over and put your hand out to stop yourself falling, the shock waves go up your arm and can break your clavicle there. So clavicle up there. Another bone that's up here by the shoulders. Just turn you around a second. We've got these shoulder blades here. They're correctly called the scapula. We've got the scapula there. So we're going to stick a scapula label on too, which is always tricky. Let's go on the back. So we've got the scapula on there. Now we've got this big obvious one here. Your ribs, your rib cage. Your rib cage is there to protect your lungs, and your heart sits just inside there. So we've got your lovely ribs to stick on there. Then joining your ribs together, joining them together down the front of your chest and protecting your heart. Your breastbone's called your sternum, the sternum. I've got that label as well. Let's see if we can stick that one sideways. Okay, so cranium, mandible, clavicle, sternum, ribs, and on the back, scapula. Then going all the way down, we've got your lovely backbone, your spine. And that's actually made of lots of separate bones. Each one is called a vertebra. So together, these are the vertebrae. It's Latin. One vertebra, many vertebrae. So another label. That one there. Whew, where else should we go next? Should we do the arms? So this one up here, one big bone at the top of your arms. There's also just one big bone at the top of your legs. And the one big bone at the top of your arms is called the humerus. The humerus. Now, it's spelt differently to funny ha-ha humerus. But you may have bashed your elbow and found it very painful. And people say, oh, I've bashed my funny bone. I've bashed my funny bone. Humerus, near your funny bone. What you've actually bashed, if you bash your funny bone, is you've bashed a nerve that runs around here in a groove at the bottom of your humerus. And that's why it hurts, because you whack that nerve and it makes your whole arm tingle. Okay, let's continue to look at Indiana Bones's arm here. You've got two bones in the lower part of your arm, just like there's two bones in the lower part of your leg. Now the one that's underneath, when you've got your thumb sticking up, the underneath one is called the ulna. U for underneath, U for ulna. And then the one that's above, and that's the one that moves and twists. When you twist your arm, that's the one that's doing the moving. So that one's called the radius, because that's the one that moves around when you twist your arm. So ulna for underneath, radius is the one that moves when you twist your arm around. So radius and ulna labels going on. So the radius is that one. And the ulna is the underneath one. That one there. Then we look at your wrists. The wrists are amazing. There's lots and lots and lots of tiny bones in there, all joined up together to make an amazing joint there. And they're called your carpals. Carpals. And then the long bones that make your hand are called the metacarpals. So carpals and metacarpals. And then your fingers are called your phalanges. Goodness me, lots and lots of vocabulary. So carpals, metacarpals, and then your fingers are your phalanges. So let's see if I can stick those labels on as well. So carpals are your wrist bones. Metacarpals, your hand bones. Stick that one in there, I think. And then your phalanges are your fingers. There we go. What a lot of labels. Okay, we're working our way down. Now, I mentioned right at the beginning, the difference between men and women, the biggest difference is in our pelvis. So, big label for pelvis. Go there. And then we'll work our way down the legs. So again, one bone in the upper part of your limbs. And your thigh bone is your femur. That's how I remember that. Your thigh bone is your femur. Your femur is the biggest bone in your body, typically about a quarter of your height. It's also the strongest bone in your body. So, label for the femur there. Stick on that side, I think. And moving down from there, we've got the two bones that are in the lower part of the limb, just like in the arm. We've got two here. Now, an awful lot of adults get the names of these two wrong. An awful lot of adults do. The front one is called the tibia. Tibia. And this is the one that's got really quite a sharp edge at the front. This is the one that if you trip over something and bash your shin on it, it really hurts because there's no padding there at all, just a bit of skin. So that's the one that really, really hurts if you bash your shin on something. And then the thin one, or the thin one, is the fibula. There's tibia and fibula. Now, a lot of adults do get it wrong. They say tibia and fibia, not fibia, fibula. So I'm going to get those labelled correctly. Oh. So tibia and fibula, different endings. Lots and lots of adults mix them up. But lots of adults as well could just call them tib and fib. Tib and fib. There's a quick way of remembering them. So tibia and fibula. Fibula's the thin one. That's how you remember those two. So tibia label going on there. And the thin fibula label going on there. Nearly done. What about our feet? We put loads of labels on our hands. What about our feet? And, oh, excuse me, Indiana. Indiana does put up with a lot, but he never complains, you know. And he's a very good listener. Get on with it, Lisa. Right, so in our wrists we had our carpals, and in our hands we had our metacarpals. In our feet, our ankle bones are our tarsals, and our foot bones are our metatarsals. So carpals and metacarpals, tarsals and metatarsals. And if you can't remember which one's which, the tarsals are the ones nearest the toes. That's how you remember which way round they go. So your tarsals are nearest your toes. So tarsals and metatarsals. And what are your toes called? Well, same as your fingers. They're called phalanges as well. And then, as I was going down the leg, there's one big difference between the arm, or the front limb, and the leg, or the back limb. And the difference is this one, your kneecaps. Now, your kneecaps have perhaps the daftest way of remembering them, because every time I go into schools and tell children what the name of this is, they always immediately mention the name of a brand of chocolate spread. What? Because your kneecap is called your patella. So the way to remember that is imagine that you've knelt down on a couple of slices of toast that are covered in chocolate spread. So your patella is covered in Nutella. Daft ways to remember things are best, because the dafter they are, the better you remember them. So if I took all these labels off, how many of them do you think you can remember? Right, so I've taken all of those labels off. I'm going to see how many of them you can remember if I pick some of them out at random. So what about the humerus? The humerus. The clue for this one is it sounds the same as another word for your funny bone. So where's this one? Right here, your upper arm, your humerus. And the funny bone is actually knocking something on your elbow. What else can we try? Whereabouts are your vertebrae? Your vertebrae. One vertebra, many vertebrae. Where are these? They're your backbone, your spine. All of these lovely, lovely bones all the way down here. What about your femur? Whereabouts is your femur? Clue for this one, it's the biggest bone in your body, the biggest one. Yeah. This beast here, a quarter of your height. It's your femur. What about this one? Your cranium. Can you remember what your cranium protects? Yeah, your cranium protects your brainium. The tough one up here, looking after the squidgy bit that is your brain. Your cranium up there. Let's do a couple more. Can you remember which are your carpals and which were your tarsals? One is your wrists and one is your ankles. Which one's which? Well, your tarsals are nearest your toes. So your tarsals are your ankle bones. So your carpals must be your wrist bones. And if you can remember those two, then you can remember your hand and foot bones. The metacarpals are your hand bones, and the metatarsals near your toes are the foot bones. Let's do one more. In your arms, the radius and the ulna. Radius and ulna. Which is which? Yeah. The ulna is underneath when you've got your thumb sticking up, which means the radius must be the one on top. And the radius is the one that does the turning and the twisting to move your hand around like that. So lots of different bone names to learn, but the more you practice them and the more you look at them and the more you use the words, the easier they get to remember.